Hayley and I travel an ancient abandoned railroad here in Colorado that leads us to several ghost towns, the Switzerland narrow gauge railroad line, which went through Nederland, Eldora, Gold Hill, and we travel up an old wagon road to see the 3,000 person ghost town, Caribou City as well. This is going to be a radical adventure. Come on a journey with us. She's eating Cheetos. We're over here, up in the mountains, following another one of Colorado's historic railways, the Switzerland Narrow Gauge Railroad, rightfully called because we're up here high in the mountains, reminding people of Switzerland. The railroad started in Boulder, Colorado, and then eventually you could get to Estes Park, which is where the Rocky Mountain National Park is at, but stop through all these towns. We're going to stop and see some ghost towns that used to be stops on this railroad, and a ghost town that used to be absolutely huge, Caribou City, which used to be a gold mine back in the early gold rush here in Colorado. She's excited. She's driving around for me. Got a little bit of Cheetos on her cheek.
Just crushed on.
We go on the Switzerland Trail, or the Switzerland Narrow Gauge Railroad line. We check out some ghost towns near Nederland, Colorado, and we show you what used to be the hottest thing to do if you lived in the Denver area, to go get on a train in Boulder and check out the mountains. So this was the main method of transit. I mean, before cars, people got up to the mountains by taking a narrow gauge railroad line, like the one that we see here. It's just a really neat little bit of history. So most of these towns around this narrow gauge railroad line are either very small now, or they're completely abandoned. So we check out a few today. It's trailblazing. Bayla's back there. The first town that we explore today is an abandoned ghost town, Caribou, Colorado, which at its height actually had around 3,000 residents. But its height was around the 1870s, when there was a lot of gold discovery and silver discovery happening in the area. This area still actually has some active mines. A geology student back in the 70s and 80s bought some of these mines, try to resurface them. It's hard to tell how much activity is going on. We did drive by some of the more modern buildings where you can tell that they're doing some stuff here. But back in the 1870s, when the gold rush was on, that's when so many of these towns were popping up around Nederland, and so many of these towns become focal points on the narrow gauge railroad line that we're exploring today, which was the Switzerland Trail, as it was dubbed. I guess because this area looked as pretty as Switzerland. If you ask me, a little. Found our first ghost town. We're over here at Caribou City. You did a great job driving.
This was the time to get up here. You can get up here and do the 2-wheel drive.
Was it rough?
Rocky.
Ruth's excited. Alright, we're gonna walk over to this little cabin, and then we're gonna go to those stone ruins. It's gonna be neat. We gotta get the dogs ready though. Bayla's just out there adventuring already. Bayla, what are you doing? It's hard to believe that 3,000 people could have fit in this valley. Park is, but Caribou held some specific significance because it was such a large town of 3,000 people, which is a pretty big town, especially in that time. It had over 100 structures in there. It had 3 saloons, so plenty of places to get toasty. in this town, a school, and God knows what else. And it had, like I said, around 100 structures. And when you look here today, it's mostly a desolate valley. There's some great trails around it. You can hike to the Rainbow Lakes. You can hike all the way to Eldora, which we're going to discover next. So some really great hiking around here. But it is a bit eerie. And that's because so many people used to live here. And as you travel around the landscape like you're seeing, you can see all these different foundations that used to exist in this town. There's also 2 larger stone structures that existed in this town. But Caribou was a happening place by all means, and today I think around 3 or 4 cars were up there, all with their dogs, all going hiking, just like we were. But it was a really interesting place to walk through. One thing that I will comes. Now, this town did burn down in the late 1800s, and I think there was both a metaphorical burning down that happened, and the metaphorical burning down was, of course, the Great Silver Crash that happened in the 1890s and the economic collapse that ensued with it, which took a lot of Colorado industry with it. You'll see a lot about that in Leadville, which was another place that was popular for silver mining, and all over this great state of Colorado. But a lot of these boom or bust towns busted, and pretty hard, in the 1890s. So that's exactly what happened with this home. By the early 1900s, I think around only 30 people lived in this town. 1917 is when the post office went out of town. In 1930 is when this was officially declared a ghost town. So you gotta think, no real inhabitants in this town for now almost 100 years. But when you look at the valley and you look at the landscape, it just breathes with the life that once was, in a bit of a haunting kind of a way, because you can tell that this was the station for a lot of life way back. And now that life, like so many towns in Colorado, has been extinguished. The biggest town in the area right now is Nederland, which is right between Caribou City and Eldora, which we explored. This is a real town. There's some great restaurants in this town. We went to one here, and we'll show you that. There's some great other restaurants. It's centered around a really nice creek, as well as we checked out the old railroad cars here, which is a coffee shop. I was surprised to find out that Caribou City predated Nederland, and Nederland was, of course, named after the Netherlands. And Nederland, surprisingly, was founded as a trading post between the Ute Indians and the European settlers that were coming to this area. And it served as a big supplier for these now new mining cities that popped up in 1870 and 1878 respectively. Eldora in 1878, Caribou City in 1870. So because of the Dutch heritage of the people that settled in this area, they named it Nederland to make it feel more like home. So Nederland similarly boomed when all of these other places boomed because of silver mining, because of gold mining, and it became a supply town for all of these areas. Developed quite rapidly. You can see a lot of the historic structures in town still. And really what made this town be on the map pretty heavily was the arrival of the Denver, Boulder, and Western Railroad in 1900, which boosted trade and transportation. Now, these other places were harder to get this railroad to. They just kind of got the narrow gauge railroad line. That was the tourist railroad. That was the one that we're talking about in this video, which is the Switzerland narrow gauge railroad line. But the Denver, Boulder, and Western is a much bigger railroad line that stops in Nederland. And now Nederland becomes kind of this hub where all the supplies are flowing to and flowing out of. We take a pit stop to eat. Check out this popular barbecue restaurant, Busey Brews, which is dog friendly in Nederland. Right by the creek, beautiful restaurant, nice outdoor area as well. We're doing another barbecue stop. We never get enough barbecue at home. You can order out here. You can have the dogs out here.
Ginger beer.
Is the ginger beer good? Wow. I know, it's so good. Is that good?
Yeah.
Is there like a sauce on it or something? Is that red? Wow. The early 20th century, of course, there's the decline in mining activities, which led to an economic downturn in this area as well. But this area had quite a bit more resilience, and because the residents had diversified the economy with logging already, with tourism and other industries to sustain the town. So this town is not a town that's only dependent on mining. So it does survive, and that's why Nederland is still a town today. There's also a big artistic community in Nederland. In fact, Caribou, there's a big recording studio at one time in the 70s near Caribou as well. There's all sorts of artists in this town, musicians, writers. Boulder's the same exact way, which is right down the hill, about 30 minutes away from Nederland driving. Okay, here is what we were talking about. 3 old railroad cars, one of which being a caboose. One from the Burlington and Southern, one from the Union Pacific, and one unknown here. But they turned these 3 train cars into a cafe so you could go in and actually experience what these narrow gauge railroad cars were like that you would have traveled in between Nederland, Eldora, Cardinal, and Gold Hill, which we're going to go to next. Caribou City was a bit off the beaten path. We went down its old wagon trail on that bumpy road. This coffee shop had some pretty exquisite coffee. It had some great desserts as well. They had homemade donuts here, miniature donuts. You could choose what sort of flavor you wanted of those, and yeah, we couldn't resist. This was one of the circus cars here. Buffalo Bill's traveling show would have been on this car going across the country. Now it's some seating as well as an art exhibit where you can buy some local art from people here in Nederland. There's some pretty cool stuff in here as well. There was a lot of other towns that popped up as a result of Caribou and the discovery of gold in that area. And one of those is close to Nederland as well. It's called Eldora. Originally, it was called Eldorado, which personally I didn't know. Eldora was also formed around the late 1800s. It was founded around the gold that was found in this area. At the time of its height, around 1,500 people lived here, and there was around 100 structures in this town. Now, we cannot call Eldora a ghost town because there are people still living there. While it does seem there are people living there, a lot of the structures do seem abandoned that we go by, and gosh, this would be such a cool town to rebuild, especially because it's in the shadow of a really cool ski resort. So if there's anyone looking to invest in Colorado, this is one of my dreams, is buying one of these old towns and redeveloping it to make it come into modernity. And of course, no better way to do that than a ski resort here in Colorado. And the good thing about this one in Eldora is it already is a ski resort. It's just right up the mountain. So this town was founded in 1878. Caribou City was 1870, so Eldora comes just a little bit later. It's right on the other side of the mountain. Like I said, you could hike there from Caribou City. It's much easier to drive to. I mean, Caribou City, we had to go through some pretty rough roads to get there. Eldora, because that ski resort's there, it's paved roads the whole way, and nice 2-lane paved roads, none of that 1-lane stuff either. So like I said, the original name was Eldorado, which means the golden one, and it is golden there. Not only did they find gold, but it is beautiful in this town with the river running right through it. There's been a lot of people that have built homes right across from the river, which are super beautiful, very modern. And that's because we're not incredibly far from Boulder here. Keep in mind, that's where this train was taking off at, was Boulder. And Eldora was one of the Switzerland Trail's stops. So that's really neat. The mining boom brought a bunch of people into this town, like I said. It was around 1878 when they all come in. And, most of the economy was around mining, but like all of these towns, miners need merchants, and then they bring their families, and miners certainly like to drink a lot of liquor. So there was a lot of industry that was built around the economy that happened here as a result of mining. And like a lot of these mining towns too, they were really reliant on the town that they lived in to get everything. So that's why these narrow gauge railroads become important, not only for tourism, but to get supplies in. People need to live in these places. So Eldora had all sorts of stuff: saloons, hotels, schools, a post office, general store. There are still some of these original buildings there today. One of the most stunning to me was the Gold Miner Inn, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. The current population is around 140 people, so about a tenth of what it was in the late 1800s. Like I said, the Eldora Mountain Resort is very close, so that does bring a lot of people to the area. Also, there's some really cool trails in that area as well. On weekends, it can get so busy that there's a shuttle that comes from the high school in Nederland about 3 miles away, and will bus you on over there. I recommend go on a weekday like us, because there's not many people in this whole area on weekdays, and you can experience a lot more of that Rocky Mountain peace, which I think is so important. Weekends are crazy. Alright, last but not least, we head on the other side of Nederland to a tiny town called Gold Hill. It's just right outside of Boulder. You can get there pretty easily from Boulder by following one of the rock roads, the Sunshine Canyon. But we're going to follow the peak-to-peak highway here, and we're going to go to another stop on the Switzerland narrow gauge railroad line and transport you back in history. Gold Hill's really cool because there's a lot of historic structures there, and you can really get a good feel for what things were like back in the late 1800s. So Gold Hill has a pretty cool history. It was actually established in 1859 as the first permanent mining camp in Colorado Mountains. It's located in an elevation of about 8,300 feet, and it's in Boulder County. And it's not too far from Boulder either, and that's because in the fall of 1858, Captain Thomas Akins led a party of about 15 people up the South Platte River towards Cherry Creek, which is in Denver. On the way, he stopped by Fort St. Vrain, and eventually they stumbled on this great-looking valley. And that is what is now known as Settlers Park in Boulder, and the great chief Niwot allowed their party to camp there. During the winter, Aiken's son James and the other members of the party started to explore the creeks above their camp, and on January 16, 1859, they found gold in a tributary of 4 Mile Creek. They called the stream Gold Run, and the mining camp that took shape on a nearby ridge became Gold Hill. After news of the find reached Denver, hundreds of prospectors rushed to Gold Hill, so this was the beginning of the gold boom that happened in this area. So Gold Hill is, quote-unquote, the OG gold town of Colorado, and you can still get a piece of that today. Gold Hill soon swelled to 1,500 residents, who mined roughly 100,000 of gold in their first year. Big money back then. The most famous and productive early find in Gold Hill was the Horsefall Lode, discovered in June 1859 by David Horsfall, William Bloor, and Matthew McCaslin. That fall, Thomas J. Graham built the area's first stamp mill. May 1860, a fire destroyed the camp, but it was soon rebuilt at a new, better sheltered site on the saddle between Gold Run and Lickskillet Gulch, which I've done some showings and had to drive up Lickskillet Gulch. It is the steepest county road in Colorado. So, best to go up there in the summer or the spring, or have some chains or snow tires for this one. There was also a tellurium boom in 1872 when miners discovered gold and silver tellurides in the area. So, the population shrunk at that time, but back in 1872 it boomed again. By 1873, the newly bustling town had a store, a post office, a school, and several boarding houses. Over the next decade, Gold Hill grew to include 3 general stores, a drugstore, a barbershop, a meat market, a pool hall, a livery stable, and 7 saloons. That's a lot of saloons per people, isn't it? Wow. With the rise of automobiles in the 1910s and 1920s, Gold Hill started to attract tourists who drove up the steep canyon roads from Boulder. I highly recommend this drive. We do it back, and it is gorgeous. In 1921, for example, a Chicago women's group called the Blue Birds bought the Wentworth Hotel, as it was called then, and turned it into a private summer retreat. 5 years later, they built a log dining hall next to the lodge. Some mining hamlets started to be converted into summer homes, but the tourist economy sprouted in Gold Hill was soon squashed by the Great Depression. For the next generation, it survived as a small residential community until the 60s, when Barbara and Frank Finn bought the Bluebird Lodge and Dining Hall, which they renamed the Gold Hill Inn, which we walk by. Gold Hill never died out. It also never experienced enough development to destroy the town's early log buildings or change its mining camp feel, which is the really neat thing about Gold Hill. Like I said, you really get transported into history here. In the 60s, the growth of Boulder sparked concerns in Gold Hill about the effects of new development on the historic town, and in 1968, residents banded together as the Gold Hill Organization to safeguard the town ghost. And in 1972, they won historic preservation zoning that allowed them to review and approve all permits for new construction in town. Gold Hill residents also have hindered development by resisting efforts to pave any of the approaches into town.
which is really, really neat because it's really got this old town feel. Today, Gold Hill has about 200 residents and more than 30 historic buildings, many of which are made of logs and date back to the town's late 19th century mining boom. The town's two main businesses are the Bluebird Lodge and Gold Hill Inn, still run by the Finn family, and the Gold Hill General Store, which serves meals. We walk in there, sells a wide variety of items. There's some really good looking pizza in there, and houses the town library. The town's 1874 schoolhouse is still in use, which we drove by when we entered the town that you saw. We really hope that you enjoyed going on an adventure with us along the Switzerland Narrow Gauge Railroad line. If you're interested in exploring Colorado, give us a message. We'd love to give you some suggestions. If you're also moving to Colorado, moving from Colorado, or just looking to invest more in Colorado, we own a real estate brokerage here, and we'd love to help you make some great investments in Colorado. If you're interested, visit our website at www.symbiodenver, that's S-Y-M-B-I-O, denver.com. Hayley and I would love to help you out. Until next time, stay radical, and this is Radically Colorado.